Europe is no longer treating war as a distant nightmare or a historical memory. Across the continent, something profound is shifting. Bunkers are reopening beneath cities. Teenagers are being asked to prepare for military service. Defense budgets are exploding. And behind closed doors, NATO is rehearsing the movement of hundreds of thousands of troops toward Russia's borders. This is not panic, and it is not rhetoric. It is quiet, deliberate preparation, driven by the belief that peace can no longer be taken for granted. But is Russia really going to go to war with Europe? Or is Europe strengthening deterrence or bracing itself for a conflict it believes may no longer be avoidable? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. For decades after the Cold War, Europe believed large-scale war on its soil was history. Borders were stable, armies were downsized, defense was outsourced to the United States of America. That era is now over. What Europe is doing today is not panic, it is preparation. And the scale of that preparation tells us one thing clearly. European leaders believe war is no longer unthinkable. It is plausible and possibly approaching. The warning shots are no longer subtle. Just days ago, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte delivered a blunt message in Germany. Russia, he said, is already waging a covert campaign against European societies. And Europe must be prepared for war on a scale last seen in the world wars of the 20th century. Not skirmishes, not proxy fights, but industrial societal war.
We are Russia's next target. And we are already in harm's way. When I became NATO Secretary General last year, I warned that what is happening in Ukraine could happen to allied countries too. That we had to shift to a wartime mindset. I fear that too many are quietly complacent. Too many don't feel the urgency. And too many believe that time is on our side. It is not. The time for action is now. We need to be ready. Because at the end of this first quarter of the 21st century, conflicts are no longer fought at arm's length. Conflict is at our door. Russia has brought war back to Europe. And we must be prepared for the scale of war our grandparents and great-grandparents endured.
Around the same time, Russian President Vladimir Putin issued his own warning. Moscow does not want war with Europe, he said. But if Europe starts one, Russia is ready. When Putin said this, it sounded threatening, even belligerent. But what followed from European capitals made his statement sound less like bluster and more like a mirror. In the United Kingdom, the language has shifted dramatically. Britain's Armed Forces Minister Al Khan said, "The shadow of war is once again falling across Europe." The UK is now developing plans to prepare the entire country, not just the military, for the possibility of war. This is not about troops alone. It is about society, industry, infrastructure, and civilians, according to Britain. Now let's be clear about one crucial point often lost in the rhetoric. Russia is not signaling a desire to conquer Europe. Moscow does not want war with NATO. That's exactly what President Putin said in his interview to India Today Global. What Russia has been explicit about and consistent on is this red line: NATO in Ukraine. From the Kremlin's perspective, Ukraine joining NATO is not a defensive move. It is an existential threat. And while European leaders may reject that logic, they understand one thing very clearly, that Ukraine's NATO dream has become the most dangerous fault line in Europe.
Ukraine thinks it better to join NATO, whereas we say that if that were the case, it would present a danger to our security. So let's search for a way that will ensure your security on the one hand, but on the other hand is not going to present a threat to us. Moreover, we're not insisting on anything, we're not demanding anything that would be unprecedented or wouldn't have roots in history. We are simply insisting on The promises that had been given to us should be observed. We didn't come up with that yesterday, you know. The thing is, this promise had been given to Russia, to the Soviet Union even, back in the 1990s.
Even Ukraine appears to be adjusting to this reality. President Volodymyr Zelensky, once uncompromising about NATO membership, is now signaling flexibility. The language has softened, the emphasis has shifted, security guarantees are being discussed, but NATO membership is no longer framed as inevitable. That alone should tell you how dramatically the strategic environment has changed. So why is Europe mobilizing at this scale? Why conscription? Why bunkers? Why 800,000 NATO troops on standby? The answer lies not in Russian intent alone, but in European vulnerability. Europe's population is shrinking and aging. Its professional armies are too small to fight prolonged, high-intensity war. Leaders know this. They know that without mass reserves, Europe cannot sustain a conflict against a major power. Conscription is not ideological. It is demographic necessity. Britain once had a classified government war book, instructions for every institution in society on how to function during war. It was abandoned after the Cold War. Today, that doctrine is quietly coming back. And Britain is not alone. Across the continent, the same shift is visible. Conscription returning, reserve forces expanding, and civilian populations being folded back into national defense. France and Germany, the twin pillars of Europe, are leading this reversal. France abolished compulsory military service in 1996. Nearly 3 decades later, it is bringing it back. President Emmanuel Macron says the logic is simple. Weakness invites danger. Protection requires preparation. That is why Germany has reopened the door to compulsory drafts. That is why Sweden, Finland, the Baltics, and Poland are expanding reserve forces. Europe is running out of manpower, and war, unlike peace, demands numbers. France will introduce a new national service for 18 to 19-year-old onwards starting next summer. Young recruits will serve in military units, earning a stipend and becoming part of a national defense ecosystem. Macron's words leave little room for ambiguity. Europe, he says, is under threat, and France cannot stand still. Germany, long hesitant to militarize because of its history, is undergoing an even deeper shift. The Bundestag has approved a system of what it calls voluntary conscription. In reality, every 18-year-old male will be required to declare his willingness to serve and undergo medical evaluation. The door to mandatory drafts is now legally open.
Und deswegen war die Entscheidung richtig, genauso wie die Entscheidung richtig ist, dass wir jetzt das Wehrdienstgesetz geändert haben und zunächst auf der Basis der Freiwilligkeit versuchen, den notwendigen Aufwuchs für unsere Streitkräfte wieder zu erzielen. Auch das ist halt keine ganz einfache Entscheidung. Und manch einer von uns, mich eingeschlossen, hätte vielleicht weitergehende Entscheidungen gewünscht. Aber genau die behalten wir uns auch vor. Wenn es nicht gelingt, die Zahl der Soldatinnen und Soldaten so schnell aufwachsen zu lassen, wie wir sie brauchen, dann müssen wir noch in dieser Wahlperiode über verpflichtende Elemente eines Wehrdienstes jedenfalls für junge Männer sprechen. Frauen können wir noch nicht einbeziehen, weil das Grundgesetz das nicht hergibt. Ich würde auch das anders gerne sehen. Ich würde gerne ein verpflichtendes Gesellschaftsjahr in unserem Land verwirklichen, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde.
Germany's goal is staggering. It wants to grow the Bundeswehr from 184,000 personnel to 260,000 full-time troops, supported by 200,000 reservists by 2035. If volunteers fall short or if the security environment worsens, compulsory service can return. And protests by students already suggest how socially disruptive that shift could be. This is not happening in isolation. Belgium and the Netherlands have introduced voluntary military service. Sweden has expanded selective conscription for both men and women. Denmark now drafts women alongside men. Latvia has reintroduced conscription. Estonia never abandoned it. Finland maintained it throughout the Cold War's end and can mobilize 280,000 trained reservists almost immediately. In Poland, the scale is even more striking. Warsaw plans to build an army of 500,000 troops, including reservists. Instead of formal conscription, Poland is training every adult citizen, men and women, in basic military skills, from survival to first aid to combat readiness. Poland is creating citizen soldiers. But manpower alone is not the driver. The deeper anxiety is strategic abandonment. For decades, Europe outsourced its security to Washington. American troops, American intelligence, American logistics, American nuclear deterrence. European defense planning assumed US intervention was guaranteed. That assumption no longer holds. Germany has allocated a €100 billion special rearmament fund. Poland plans to spend nearly 5% of its GDP on defense. The Baltic states are targeting similar levels. France and Sweden aim for 3.5%. Finland is heading toward 3% by 2029. At the European Union level, the scale becomes almost historic. The EU has launched what it calls the Rearm Europe or Readiness 2030 plan, a framework to mobilize up to €800 billion for defense. This includes a $150 billion loan instrument for joint weapons procurement, drones, missiles, ammunition, and the use of private capital to sustain long-term militarization. This is Europe admitting something it avoided for decades. Peace is no longer guaranteed, especially by the United States of America, and deterrence now requires mass, speed, and resilience. Which brings us to infrastructure, the least visible but most telling part of this mobilization. Germany is implementing a classified blueprint called Operation Plan Germany, or Plan DEO. It is a 1,200-page document detailing how up to 800,000 NATO troops, German, American, and Allied, would be moved east toward the Russian frontier in the event of a war. 800,000 troops. That number alone tells you Europe is planning for something far beyond Ukraine. Our Plan DEO is designed to ensure political decisions can be made instantly, constitutionally, and in coordination with NATO. No delays, no debates, just movement. Norway is restoring Cold War-era bunkers and mandating bomb shelters in new large buildings. Eastern European states are stockpiling landmines and munitions. Military logistics, roads, railways, fuel depots are being rebuilt for war. Taken together, these actions paint a stark picture. Europe's leaders believe war with Russia is a real possibility, not someday, but within this decade. Some intelligence assessments suggest a NATO-Russia confrontation could occur by 2028. But here's where the story becomes more complex. This mobilization is not just about Russia, it is also about America. Since February 2022, Europe has watched Russia's war in Ukraine with alarm. But since 2024, it has also watched Washington with uncertainty. The return of Donald Trump to the White House shattered a core European assumption that America's security guarantee is eternal. Trump administration has made it brutally clear. Europe must carry more of its own defense burden. The era of free riding under an American umbrella is over. For European capitals, this was a strategic shock. So what we're witnessing is not just fear of Russia, it is fear of abandonment. Europe is preparing for a future where US support may be delayed, conditional, or even absent.
I've spoken to many countries. They all want to do, just so you understand the power of what I'm doing. Every country is calling and being very solicitous of us. Very, very nice. They're being very nice. And we have to be able to justify. This is not sustainable. The United States can't lose $1.9 trillion on trade. We can't do that and also spend a lot of money on NATO in order to protect European nations. We cover them with military, then we lose money on trade. The whole thing is crazy. And I got elected on that basis. We explained it. You know, the American people understand it a lot better than the media. But the media understands it. And much of the media writes correctly about it, I must say.
This also explains the urgency. the speed, the scale. Europe is racing against time to rebuild capabilities it dismantled over 30 years. Yet, there is an uncomfortable question at the heart of all this. Is Europe deterring war or preparing itself psychologically to accept one? Support for conscription drops as you move west and south. Protests have already erupted in Germany. Britain has ruled out a draft for now. Italy and Spain remain cautious. Societies that lived in peace for generations are struggling to absorb the reality of militarization. And that tension may be Europe's greatest vulnerability. You can build bunkers, you can print budgets, but can democratic societies sustain war readiness without breaking internally? For now, European leaders believe they have no choice. They argue that weakness invites aggression, that preparation prevents conflict, that deterrence works only if it is visible and credible. Whether that belief holds will depend on Ukraine. If the war there de-escalates through a negotiated settlement, Europe's mobilization may slow. If it escalates or spreads, this silent mobilization will become loud, fast, and irreversible. Europe is not marching yet, but it is lacing its boots. Conscription is returning. Bunkers are reopening. NATO force plans now run into the hundreds of thousands, not as deployments, but as contingencies designed to be activated. Europe might be panicking, but they're also preparing. Russia may not be out there to conquer Europe, but Europe no longer trusts the post-Cold War order where once US kept the peace. And in that uncertainty, it is choosing preparation over complacency. The silent mobilization has begun, not because war is certain, but because Europe believes the cost of being unready would be far greater. Thank you for watching Statecraft.